This is gonna be like a diary entry style. So it's May 18th at 5:08 p.m. This is Riley.
Hey.
This is Disha. And what time would it be in Lubbock?
In Lubbock right now, it would be 10 a.m.
So that means 9 a.m. in El Paso. But let me tell you about what we've done so far. We could just like sit on back. Oh, Riley's joining me.
I need to go on a walk, guys.
No, she can.
We just sat in a classroom for like 10 hours.
That's
I can't
an
complain.
optimistic way to look at it.
I can't complain. Tomorrow we're gonna go see some lions and go on a safari and go to an elementary school.
Yeah, I'm excited about the elementary school.
So I can't complain too much. I'm excited. Okay, have fun.
Bye. So, let me tell you about what I've learned so far. First off, we went to the mall yesterday, which is like such an American thing to do, but I got these earrings and they have a little heart where South Africa is. So now I am showing the world that I love South Africa. But I wanted to talk about what we talked about in class today. So we got kind of like a brief overview of South African culture and like their history. And of course, it's like hard to define an entire culture in like 30 minutes. But like she talked a little bit about like the cultural history and how the country is divided and how recently freedom has really happened for South Africa, especially for all of its citizens. So about 25 years ago, they said they finally like declared individual rights for, and she's back. Sorry.
Continue what you're doing.
Okay, just ignore me in the back. But they said 25 years is when they sort of declared independence for most of its citizens. So she said, or our teacher, our professor, she said that the country is really divided into like 4 major categories. So you have like the mixed community, you have the colored community, you have like the black community, and then you have the Indian community. And it sounds kind of like racist to say those like terms and to like say it out loud, but that's how they have it written in their like constitution, and that's the way that they identify themselves. So that was very like interesting to see, just because if you said that in America, it would just be like you were a racist and it would just be very offensive. And then she mentioned how like 25 years ago, there's me and this other Indian girl who are a part of like our study abroad team, that me and her wouldn't even be allowed to travel to certain parts of the country or to sit amongst like people who are white, because they didn't have a rule for that. So if I'm 20 years old right now, so if I hadn't come to the, well, I guess it would have been a long time ago, but it's within, like, I know people who are 25 years old, like, it's not that much older than me, and if I had come to this country, like, 25 years ago, I wouldn't be allowed to do anything, and it's just, like, very sad. And then it was also interesting to see how intermingled, like, all of these cultures are, because she talked about how, like, the West Indian Trade Company, or like this, it was like one of the trade companies, the ones that brought all of the spices over, and the Indian slaves, they brought a lot of the slaves over, and then the British came in and they colonized South Africa, and since they came and colonized South Africa, they brought a lot of the cultures that the British people were used to, one of those being all of the Indian spices. So it was interesting to see how, like, some of the spices that my mom uses back home to cook are very similar to the ones that they have here, and they have chutneys that they eat at almost every meal. She talked about, let me pull it up, let me see. There was a very specific dish that we had yesterday. She said like this is considered like the poor man's meal, and it was called shebu and pap is made out of cornmeal, and like it almost looks like fufu dough. And then shebu is like a tomato and onion custard, and like there's this thing that my grandma makes that's also like tomato and onion goj. I said that so weird. And it tasted very similar to me. It was very like, it tasted like kind of like sar, which is this watery, it's like watery but with lentils and different spices and tomato, and it's almost like a watery soup. It's not even a soup. It's just, I don't know how to describe it. Google it. But it was very good, and you eat it with the pap, and the pap almost tastes like idli if you're familiar with South Indian food. So like together, it kind of just reminded me of like sambar and idli. So that was interesting to see. And then she also talked about how just different, like, they view wildlife. So the Big Five is in South Africa. So there's lions, there are cheetahs, there are rhinos, and a couple more that are like very protected. And we're actually getting to go, like Riley mentioned earlier, we're getting to go see one in real life. And hopefully it won't be like a Tiger King situation because I'm too much of an animal activist for that. But it's like interesting to see them in their natural habitat and to like drive around the South African communities and see like the wildlife and like the different I know how to say this word, botany, there we go, botany, that is just shown on National Geographic, and like you can see it in person when you drive around. So that was like interesting to see. And then at the same time, she also talked about like how the people of South Africa, it's just like the government is very corrupt, and there's just like so much like governmental mistrust, even though now it's like starting to get a lot more reformed. And she said that they use a president, and then they have a parliament, and then they have like different judicial departments, but the government is still very corrupt based on who gets appointed, because they don't get elected here. The people vote for the party that they want, and the party appoints like the president to lead the country. So the people who tend to do good and try to get rid of that corruption usually get kicked out of office because the other people who are appointing them from the party want that corruption to last so they can continue to get those high salaries and do whatever they want on their agenda. So that was interesting to see just from like a governmental political standpoint. And then at the same time, HIV and AIDS is really high in the country. So they talked about how different governmental institutions, they don't want South Africa to be seen as the country with the highest prevalence of HIV and AIDS. So what they did was they changed what the hospitals could declare as their cause of death. So instead of just being a country where there's like a high relevance of HIV and AIDS, now they've started reducing those levels, but not by like actually treating. Well, I'm sure there are like some treatments out there and like resources, but to like start to remove that like label on the country, the hospitals can't declare HIV and AIDS as like the main reason of death. They have to list the secondary cause of death. So that way like there aren't as many cases of that reported as the cause of death. And I don't know how, like, accurate or true that is for all of the different regions of South Africa. These were probably just general facts that she was teaching to us, but it was very interesting for me to see. And then tomorrow, let's see, what else? What else have I done so far? Oh, yesterday we got here, we did all of our flights. I got to talk to an auntie and uncle when I was flying in from Dallas, and I basically acted like their translator. And it was very interesting to practice my Hindi. They said that they lived in Mumbai, so they got to see like Shah Rukh Khan's house. And they said that they were like low-key neighbors with them, and they could just see everything, and they could see Manat. And then after that, I got on the flight to go to, when we were waiting at the airport, I met this lady from Colombia, and she was, first off, her fashion statements and like her outfit was on point, and she reminded me of Miss Beatrice a lot, one of my mom's friends, and she was just very like expressive, and she was so down to earth, and she was so down to try different things, and she kept talking about how her English wasn't that good, but if I had tried to speak Colombian Spanish, like, I would have been a whole mess. So it was like interesting to see how like, well, I guess this is something that I've seen a lot, but how we as Americans expect people to just learn English and just like, communicate with us versus us trying to make that effort. And I definitely tried to make that effort. Even like when I'm here, I make sure all of the people who are helping us at this lovely resort, I learn their names, and I try as much as I can to make them feel validated, because like, as we talked about, 25 years ago wasn't that long. And if you also look at generational stereotypes, when you grow up with different schools and with that much segregation, one day when the law says that it isn't legal anymore to act or treat people that way, it's not going to disappear overnight. It's going to continue because it's institutional in some ways. And like social constructs that have just shaped society to act a certain way. So you can definitely still see that, because like, a lot of the elderly population now who are African and who are people of color still aren't that educated, and I'm not saying all of them, there are definitely exceptions to the rules, but they didn't have the resources when they were little to learn all of this, and they had to grow up in that terrible like world of you can't learn because you're this certain color. And so even now, like, that still exists, and you can see it like when we walked around the mall and we see people who are working here, like the people who are white generally are the ones who are owning the resorts, and the people who are working for them, who are the cooks, who are the people who are cleaning the rooms, are black. It sounds so wrong. It feels so weird to say that out loud, just because like it sounds like such a derogatory term, especially like for what we describe it in America as, and that's what they said to call them. So it just feels weird and wrong to say it, but that is what they said that they call themselves as. And so that's kind of like a summary of what we've talked about so far. We have some assignments due. And tomorrow we get to go to a school, and we're going to be talking to like preschool age students and their teachers, and we're going to be talking about soy products. And it's cool because Dr. Wilna, who's one of our professors, she's vegetarian, and I'm the only other vegetarian on the trip. So it was very neat to me to see how typically when I go on trips and stuff, everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're vegetarian, how do you eat, like, blah, blah. And there's definitely still that, because I mean, I am going to school with people from Lubbock who typically aren't really exposed to vegetarians in that many different cultures, and there's definitely still is some of that, but at the same time, they can see how you can survive in different countries with a vegetarian diet, and to see one of our professors who doesn't treat it as, oh, I have to go out of the way to make it an accommodation, who's just like, I am vegetarian too, don't you worry. It was very like, it's a good feeling. And then at the soy cow, it's basically like a machine that extracts like different soy products, and then this is actually like one of the research things that she focuses on. So she's going to go back after the study abroad trip, and she will be focusing on what we're doing and etc. And then I think after that we get to go to a wildlife sanctuary, and we're going to be seeing like a lion sanctuary. And then we will be going around and seeing what Johannesburg is about. It's one of the capitals in South Africa, and it's also a place where a lot of different events have occurred, whether it be with apartheid. I feel like I'm saying that wrong, but you know what I mean. And with the segregation, and where a lot of violence has happened, and where change is currently trying to happen because it's so populated and it's a city. But yeah, I am so happy to be here. I'm still a little bit jet lagged, but they just fixed our rooms. Low-key reminds me of India. I can't believe I just said low-key. But it reminds me of India in some ways, and I can see a lot of like the same problems that the third world country over there has, because like India is so developed, but at the same time there's so much poverty. Can be seen here in South Africa too, where there's a lot of development, but at the same time there's a lot of poverty. And she talked about how with the corruption, the police and the hospitals, if you go to a public hospital, it's like you go to the hospital to be killed, is what Dr. Wilma said was like a running joke in South Africa. Unless you have money and insurance, then you get to go to a private hospital. And like as a future healthcare provider, that was interesting for me to see. And I guess like it isn't surprising, just because that is how it is in a lot of different countries, and in America too. Like I wouldn't say public hospitals are bad in any way, but if you don't have insurance, then it's hard sometimes to see those top doctors that you really want, and the ones that are experienced in specific surgeries or have a more accepting and wider range of knowledge and perspectives and empathy when interacting with patients on a one-on-one level. And I kind of sound educated as I'm listening to myself talk through all these 14 minutes of just different things that have happened. But I am happy to be here. I applied to medical school yesterday. I did all my JAM paperwork. So on campus there is a pub, there is a restaurant, and there is like the convention center area, which is basically where we go to study, and then our rooms, and the internet goes out. Like they have like citywide power outages, And the only place that had Wi-Fi, and happened during the exact same time that I had to attend a JAMP Zoom meeting, was happening when I needed to attend. So we had an African drum lesson yesterday, and then right after that I had to go sit at the pub. And it isn't like an American pub, but it wasn't the most comfortable either. But we had not like in any weird way. It was just like the smells and stuff. But I had to sit there and watch the Zoom meeting, and they couldn't tell what was happening. But you have to do what you have to do, especially when you're living your double life in a way and making sure that you still finish all of your American responsibilities, even though you're here to learn and study and you're in a different country 7 hours apart. So it's like just memory making. I'll remember all of this, and one day when I look back at this vlog when I'm like 80 years old, I will be proud of myself, and just so grateful for this opportunity. And to whoever's watching this, I hope you enjoy my 16 minutes, or I guess around 16 minutes, update of the first, I guess, 2.5-ish days. It's been one official day since I've been in South Africa, but then if you count like all of the traveling, it was like 30 hours of traveling and like all the time changes and stuff. So it has been very fun. Okay, thank you for listening to me. Goodbye.